Welcome to the Set to Lead podcast, the online mentoring platform for emerging and current leaders. My name is Marianne Samdi, leadership coach and talent development expert, and I will be your host. Welcome, Chellie.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here with you today.
So am I. I think this is going to be a wonderful conversation, and it's so needed. Today's session is about culture building. And I hope together we can delve into the complexities and some of the nuances of organizational culture. But before we get started, would you mind giving the audience a little history on your background?
Yeah, so I did not start out in this field. I was actually in journalism. That was my background. So I have a journalism and PR degree. And so, but I think it kind of really laid a great foundation for me because what that taught me when I was working in newspaper and everything is that, really how to listen to people and dive in and get the story. What really matters? What's the heart? What's the decision making piece? Or why do we believe the things that we believe and why are they important to us? So I did that for several years and then I moved into corporate PR. And I've worked in the utility industry for 25 years, leading their PR and marketing departments, and also building our own culture initiative programs inside the organization where I work. We built our own internal leadership development program that was all about breaking down silos, bringing people together, increasing collaboration, all the things that great culture needs.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Before we start getting into the topic, I always like to start off with defining what we're going to talk about. So I was wondering, in your experience, how would you define organizational culture? And why do you think it's crucial to business success?
So for me, I look at culture as the fuel that allows us to get work done. To me, it's what determines the success of any company or organization. Um, it's the beliefs, the goals, the values, the emotions, and the intentions that every person inside your organization or your company walks through the door with each day. It's really to me the heart and guts of the company. It's crucial because it shapes the way that people work together, and making sure that they're on a common path so that they know the goals. Strong cultures promote teamwork, innovation, employee engagement, and that really sets the tone um, for whether employees are interested in solving problems and how they handle challenges, and really how invested they are in the success of that organization and whether they become, basically a brand champion for you so that they become your biggest advocates when you're recruiting and hiring, and how do you retain the people that you have that are doing great work.
Wow. Yeah. So I like what you said there. It's a common path to all good things. I'm paraphrasing,
Uh-huh,
but
yeah.
it's a good start. It's that engine that promotes and sets the tone for everything that comes thereafter.
Yeah, it's really the map, like if you think you're on a road trip like think of the road trip as I'm building great culture, it is that map that gets us to where we're going and we're all on the same road headed in the same direction, making the same turns, not getting derailed at the rest stops or not getting stuck by roadblocks, but we're on this common path and we all agree on what the future of that organization looks like.
Okay. Um, I wonder if a lot of businesses start off with creating that roadmap for their culture. What's been your experience? Do they, make sure they do that work ahead of time and have it all mapped out before they start hiring? Do you see people doing it after they've launched their business? And what is a good timing to get that all set up?
The perfect timing would be to do that at the very beginning, as you're creating that business. But my experience, and then when I was interviewing, a lot of major companies, nationally known companies, and everything for the Culture Secrets book, it really didn't happen that way. Culture was not a big deal years and years ago. It's become something more of a forefront topic, especially since COVID, because people are like have spent a lot of time reevaluating what do we want to do? Is this where I want to be? And why do I want to do this kind of work? And so I think more emphasis has been placed on it in the last several years than maybe previously. And I think culture gets their bad rep of that it's kind of considered fluff, because people don't really know what culture is. And that I found that to be the case when I was doing the interviews for the book. A lot of people looked at culture as, oh, it's a pizza party. It's, it's company swag. It's, we're going to give everybody a gift card at Christmas or something like that. But that's really not culture at all. That's more pieces of recognition. It's more, appreciation kind of thing. Culture is really about what sets you apart, what's your vision for the future, and it's about the values that you and the company hold. So it's always better, I'd say, to do it earlier than later. But I love, there's a proverb that's out there that, like, when is the best time to plant the tree? Well, the best time to plant the tree was yesterday, so it could have grown and developed. But today is not bad either, because it's going to grow and it's going to continue and it's going to develop over the years. So I would say now is the best time to start focusing on culture, whether or not it's something that you had planned on before or not.
Excellent. So it's never too late.
Never too late.
Well, since you have been doing a lot of the surveys for your book, you've ran into a lot of leadership teams. What do you think are the top three poor behaviors from a leadership team in a poor culture, and why?
I love this question, because without a great leadership team and a strong leadership team, you will never have a strong culture inside the organization. So, first and foremost to me is lack of communication. If leaders fail to share information, goals, expectations, it's going to create a lot of confusion inside the workplace. And people like to know what's happening. They like to feel like they're involved in the conversation. So if you don't have leaders that are willing to communicate with their teams and put out things and make sure that everybody's on the same page, it's going to lead to a lot of misunderstanding and disconnection, and you're not going to be headed in the right direction. Secondly, I think the thing that is um, poor leadership is micromanagement, because what that's saying is you don't trust your team to get the job done. And so if you're a leader who doesn't trust your team, then it's going to stifle creativity, it's going to limit autonomy, and it really just signals the lack of confidence that you have in that team. So that team is not going to perform at their highest caliber for you, because they're always going to feel like, well, as long as someone's micromanaging me, I don't have the time to do what I need to do. I'm not going to be able to do this to the best of my ability. Someone's ever looking my shoulder, always going to be questioning me. And so that really erodes the way that that team feels about that leadership. And then finally, I would say probably the biggest one would be leaders that have inconsistent values. And what I mean by that is, like, if your company has decided on a set of values and you're talking about them, but the leader's actions don't match or align with the values that they say that are important to them. So it's very important, I think, when that you walk the talk, and that you also, you know, allow people to see you living the values that you're say is important to that organization and to you as that leader, and that they don't have to interpret what you're doing and decide, do they really mean it, or is this something that's really, um, they're just talking a talk to me, and it doesn't really matter to them, because that creates a whole lot of confusion, and then employees don't really understand what's important or what they're going to be held accountable for if their own leaders are not being held accountable for it.
Those are some great behaviors. Um, what strikes me is the last one, inconsistent values. And my question to you would be, would you recommend that on a biannual or annual basis that you recheck your values to see what's inconsistent?
Oh yeah, I think it's important that as a leader that we have some kind of feedback mechanism in place, that we're listening to our teammates, that we're listening to those that we're answering to, and that we're making sure that we're in alignment. And, I think it's important for us to do those self checks along the way too, to make sure that, yeah, I'm showing up the way I say I'm showing up, or that I am living what I am expecting out of my team as well. I don't think that's something that you can do too often. I would say even quarterly, like do a little gut check, make sure, like keep a goals list on your desk and like, am I following this? Am I doing this? Am I living or am I showing and modeling the behaviors that I'm expecting from my team?
Right. Because that impacts your legacy.
Yes, it absolutely does. It also impacts whether people really trust you as their leader. Like I said, because if they don't see you modeling those same behaviors, they're not going to really expect that you're going to hold them to them as well.
Yeah. I was wondering, Shelley, can a company truly have a one size fits all culture? Or should leaders be adapting their approach based on the unique needs of the different teams they have or departments?
Oh, I love that question. Um, so and I don't I feel like a company can have an overarching vision for what they want their culture to be. But I think you also have to temper that with your different departments. Um, I think you should have that shared set of goals and behaviors so that we know what our expectations are. However, the different teams can meet those in different ways based on, you know, um, what's going on in there, what the skills of those employees are, what the task for their days are. So I think leaders have to really adapt based on their team because each of our teams are unique in their functions, their skill sets, their objectives. Like for example, maybe excellent customer service is one of your culture values. But how your team adds to that goal, how are they impacting that customer journey could be totally different from your accounting department to your production line. And so I think you have to have a little bit of flexibility in there and say that, okay, we're going to be striving for these goals, but how you meet them and the behaviors that you associate them can be varied across your organization. And, team dynamics play a big part of that. So, as a leader, catering to the strengths of the team members that you have, that requires you to get you to know your team, which I think is incredibly valuable in culture building. People want to feel that personal touch, they want to feel like they're bringing value and that they matter on this journey. And so different departments are going to allow for different degrees of flexibility and autonomy. And, when you do that and when you incorporate what's best for each department, you're going to encourage innovation, creativity, and it's going to give your teams the ability to think out of the box, really stretch their goals, and really be able to impact that culture and really surpass the goals that you set for the organization.
That's wonderful because, when you're setting up this culture strategy, you were talking about before that some of the poor behavior is no goals and expectations. So once you set the vision, you set the goals and you start cascading it down, you need to give your department heads expectations on how to leverage those goals in their team.
Absolutely.
That's good stuff. Because I think sometimes people just want to set it and leave it alone.
Yeah, and it like you got to have those rechecks along the way. It's like, okay, how are we doing? Is this goal really working for us? Is it accomplishing what we need, or do we need to tweak it? The thing about culture too is that it's a little bit fluid. It's not it doesn't have to be set in concrete. Like you can have your goals, but the way you get to them can be very individual to your different departments and your teams and even your different leadership styles. Leadership's changing inside organizations. We're becoming more coaching leaders than maybe the more tried and true, you're going to just do what I say do kind of leadership. And so we have to adapt as those things change in our workplace, as our teammates change, as our duties change. And, with businesses, you never know, you can acquire new acquisitions, new product lines, new all kinds of stuff. And all of these things can really impact the people that are there. And so keeping culture at the forefront and being able to do these rechecks and double checks along the way, I think are so vital.
Awesome. Is it possible for a leader to be too focused on cultivating what we call a fun or innovative culture, that they overlook some of the essentials of culture development?
I think anytime you get focused on any one part versus the overarching vision of it,
Mhm.
that can be a problem. And so if you don't set the foundation to begin with, like what those shared values are, and that you don't really guard the decision making and you don't set those behaviors, that can be a problem. So like if you skip past all that and go, oh, we just want to be known as the fun group, or we want to be known as the innovative company, but we don't do the work to get how are we going to achieve those things, then yes, you can have great intentions of being very innovative and everything, but I don't think you'll ever actually get there because you haven't built those building blocks. You don't have the structure in place to actually make it happen. And then, if your employees' well-being isn't considered, you also are going to have those issues with employee engagement and retaining them. So fun and innovation can't overshadow communication, building blocks, value assessment, and all of that kind of stuff. So I think you just need to make sure that you have a very well-rounded approach and that you're touching on all the key areas to make it happen.
That's great. Those are some great tips. If you can't focus on everything at once, like let's say you're just getting started with this whole cultural roadmap, would you recommend maybe the top three you should address first?
Yeah, so in my book, Culture Secrets, I use a simple formula. I call it a value-based culture. And so if you take the letters that form the word value, I think you should always begin with your vision and values. That's the very first thing that you need to do. And then the next letter would be A. And for me, that's accountability. And accountability is taking those values and assigning behaviors to them. What are we going to hold people accountable to? What are we going to be measuring? What are we going to say that if you're doing these things, you're doing a great job, and we're going to be on our road to building that culture? The L is leadership. So you need to make sure that your leadership is on all the same paths and that they understand the direction and that they're bought into it. You also need to give them the tools that they can use to be their team. Like give them that flexibility that we were talking about to be able to define the behaviors in a way that works with their team so that they're getting the most out of the strengths that those teams have to offer. The U in the word value is the uniqueness of your employees. You've got to get your employees involved, have discussions with them, make sure they're bought in on that process of culture building, why it matters, how it's going to be an improvement for them. Work on recognition, making sure that they feel like they're contributing, that they belong here, that they're being recognized for the work that's happening. And then the final letter is E, that's the engagement. That's what we're creating. It's the excitement of being there. It's that I enjoy what I do. I feel like I'm a productive member of this organization. I feel like I'm adding to the success of the organization. And this is where you begin to turn your employees into your biggest recruiters because they're going to tell their friends, their colleagues, their connections that, hey, this is a great place to work. Look at all the great things that are happening here. They're bought into my professional development. We see big changes happening. I have a boss that listens to me. There's feedback. I have the opportunity to input ideas. And so if you kind of just take it along those lines and follow the value kind of formula and just pick one of those at a time and set it apart, then I think you're going to be on the road to success.
Thank you for sharing your value acronym. I think that's very helpful
Yeah.
and methodical when you start to address this cultural approach. When we consider that value acronym,
Mhm.
are there any considerations when you have employees that are geographically dispersed?
Oh yeah, remote now is something that we all have to take into consideration. But I think the word that matters the most is intentional. That whether it's, you have a remote or geographically dispersed organization, being intentional about fostering connection and communication and that sense of a shared purpose, the shared goal that we're having to is so important. And some of the ways that you can do that is, like creating regular updates for your employees. You can do virtual team building events. You can emphasize the values, all the chance that you have. incorporate recognition and milestones through that, making sure that you're providing professional development. And there's so many digital tools out there now, whether it's internal, websites, whether it's things like Slack or Circle or some of the other platforms that are out there where people can interact and engage with each other and be kept up to date with things, not having to go look for information or searching through emails to find it. I think that's one of the keys to making sure that everyone still feels like they're connected to that vision and that they're still getting the check-ins and the collaborative environment that really makes people enjoy doing what they do.
Okay. So remote work is a big part of our world, and so is diversity and inclusion.
Mhm.
So, are there specific tactics leaders can leverage to ensure that the chosen culture is inclusive and it fosters a sense of belonging for employees with varied backgrounds and perspectives?
Yeah, and I think it's more simple than people really make it sometimes. I think the easiest way to do that is have all of your employees involved in the building and the design of your value system. I think if you have input from your employees, ask them what the values are that matter to them when they think of the company. What are the things that they want this company that they're associated to be known for, known with? And you get that input. And then what you can do as a leadership team is then narrow it down to maybe a set of 3, 5, 7, whatever you decide's right for you, values that the organization is going to focus on. But the thing about doing that is you've gotten the input. People have felt like their voices are heard and they're bringing to the table the things that matter to them as individuals. Like we talked about, that culture initially is what I'm showing up at work with every day, what I walk in the door with, whether that's our experiences, our life experiences, our work experiences, our skill sets, everything that's going on. And so, when you narrow it down, then you can take your management team and really define how can we effectively reach these values and put them out to the team. And then you can take them back in smaller groups to your team and have those team leaders. Okay, let's work on what behaviors are going to get us to these values so that we all agree as a team. If I exhibit X, Y, and Z, then I am accomplishing this value statement. And so, if you bring the team together to come up with the behaviors that go along with a group of values that the whole organization has created, then you have that buy in from top to bottom and bottom up, which we all really crave, like when we're building the strong people centered cultures that we have in our workplace. And when you have everybody's input, it's going to build a lot of trust. They're going to feel very cohesive and it's going to really increase that sense of belonging, which is what we're really going for.
How long can someone expect for this due diligence around culture to take?
I think it really depends on where you're starting from. If you've never done any culture work or anything like that, I think you've got to do the background work first. Like I said, like build those values and that kind of thing. And if you've not held people accountable, it's something that you have to get them used to. And people are resistant to change until you can show them that it's going to have a positive impact on that. So you've got to have a little patience in the process too, because or if you've tried some of these things, like I said, like with pizza parties and throwing out t-shirts and different things like that, and you've talked the talk, but you haven't really put the work in it and done the work inside the organization, people may not trust that anything's really going to happen. So I think you're going to need 12 to 18 months to really see some major changes and some impact inside the organization. But I think you can start seeing smaller movements and smaller changes within 3 to 6 months inside your teams itself. And then as those teams begin to gel and they begin moving forward and people begin to see changing happen, then that solidifies it across the organization.
So, this is a long process, and I can imagine with any long process, there's a lot of dialogue. So, I'm wondering how can leaders encourage constructive disagreement while maintaining or creating a cohesive culture?
The first thing I think you need to set on the table is that really early on, you need to be clear that that you expect feedback. Sometimes the thing with our leadership groups is sometimes they feel like they can only tell the CEO or whoever's in charge the things they want them to hear. So if you're leading that cultural initiative, I think you need to really encourage your leadership team that's doing that to bring you the good and the bad, so you know what's happening. So you're getting that view from your front end workers all the way up to your leadership team, and you can set that tone, even down as far as you're having these individual meetings with your team, is that you can have feedback meetings there. It's like, okay, how are you feeling about this? Are we doing this? Do you still feel like this goal or this behavior is something that we need to track? And you can do it in a way that's respectful. You can do it in a way that allows for diverse viewpoints. But your leader in each of those teams is going to have to model that behavior. They're going to have to ask for that feedback initially, because a lot of times employees are not going to come to you and say, hey, something's not working, you wanted us to do. They're just going to either bypass it or whatever, or you're not going to hear about it until it's too late to fix it. So you really have to be the one that goes and reaches out to them and say, hey, tell me how you're feeling about it. Tell me what's hanging up. Tell me what's working. Tell me what's not. And you know then practice some active listening. The one thing that's worse is you get people talking to you, but you don't really hear what they're saying. And so as that leader, you have to stop responding and start listening more. And then repeat back to them what they've told you, and make sure that you're understanding where they're coming from, what the issues are, and do that regularly, probably more than you really feel comfortable with to begin with. And one thing I'll say too, especially with now that we have so many generations in the workplace, is this newer generation, especially our millennial generation, likes the word why. And as leadership, I don't want you to think of the word why as a negative. Instead, I want you to think of it as that they're showing interest and they want to understand. Just
Mm.
because someone asks why doesn't mean that they're anti anything or that they're against it. It just means they're trying to understand and process it a little bit better. And so if you go into that discussion mode of what's working, what's not, how can we make this better, with those kind of thoughts in mind, I think you're going to have some great experiences, and it's going to really build that cohesive culture inside your organization.
Thank you for sharing that last piece there, because why doesn't have to be confrontational. Um,
Correct.
it can be a way to grow. So thank you so much for sharing that, because I think a lot of people do find offense when someone asks questions and they want to understand why. So I appreciate that. What
Yeah.
a great conversation.
Thank you so much. I could talk about this for hours with you.
So could I. I think this is really good stuff. But unfortunately for today, we are at the end of the show. Hopefully you can come back another time and we could have a longer dialogue. But as we close out, can you kindly let the audience know how they can follow your work?
Oh, absolutely. Easiest way to connect with me is on my website, which is chelliphillips.com. That's ChelliPhillips.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. Promote a lot on there, share blog posts, do a newsletter that comes out all the time. Facebook, Instagram, find me by my name. And if you engage with me on a social platform, I promise to respond back. I love to engage with people and have conversations with them. And so I look forward to meeting many of your listeners that way.
Thank you so much for stopping by today.
Thanks for having me. It's been a joy.